It was a dark, stormy night when Sarah Winters first saw her. The rain pounded against the windows of the small adoption center, as if nature itself was trying to warn her. But Sarah was desperate. She had lost her only daughter, Emily, in a tragic accident just a year ago. The void left by Emily's absence was unbearable, and Sarah had convinced herself that another child might help to heal her broken heart. When Sarah entered the adoption center, her eyes immediately fell on a little girl sitting quietly in the corner, her head bowed, her long dark hair covering her face. There was something about the child that drew Sarah in, something inexplicably familiar. The adoption agent, Mrs. Clarkson, noticed Sarah's interest and approached her. "That's Lily," Mrs. Clarkson said with a warm smile. "She's a bit shy, but she's a good girl. Quiet, obedient, and well-behaved." Sarah nodded, unable to take her eyes off Lily. There was something about the girl that tugged at her heartstrings. Perhaps it was the way Lily reminded her of Emily, the same delicate features, the same soft demeanor. Without a second thought, Sarah made the decision. "I'll take her," Sarah said, her voice firm with determination. The paperwork was completed quickly, almost too quickly, and soon Sarah was driving home with Lily in the back seat. As they passed the cemetery where Emily was buried, Sarah glanced in the rearview mirror. For a fleeting moment, she thought she saw Lily smiling, a cold, sinister smile that sent a chill down her spine. But when she looked again, Lily's face was impassive, her eyes staring blankly out the window. Sarah shook off the uneasy feeling and focused on the road ahead. She convinced herself that she was imagining things, that the grief of losing Emily was playing tricks on her mind. The first few days with Lily were uneventful, almost peaceful. The girl was indeed quiet, spending most of her time in her room, playing with Emily's old toys. Sarah tried to engage Lily in conversation, but the girl only responded with nods or single-word answers. She never smiled, never laughed, and never cried. One night, Sarah was awoken by a strange noise coming from Lily's room. It was a low, humming sound, almost like chanting. Sarah hesitated at first, then slowly got out of bed and tiptoed to Lily's room. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, Sarah could see Lily sitting on the floor, her back to the door, facing the wall. The humming grew louder as Sarah approached. "Lily," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Lily stopped humming abruptly. The room fell into a heavy silence. Slowly, Lily turned her head to look at Sarah, her eyes dark and empty. "Go back to bed, Mommy," she said, her voice cold and distant. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She stumbled back to her room, her mind racing with fear and confusion. Something was wrong with Lily, but she couldn't put her finger on it. The next morning, Sarah tried to convince herself that it was just a bad dream, but the memory of Lily's voice sent shivers down her spine. Over the next few weeks, strange things began to happen around the house. Objects would go missing only to reappear in odd places. The lights would flicker inexplicably, and the air grew colder, even when the heater was on full blast. Sarah started hearing whispers in the dead of night, soft voices that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. One day, while cleaning the attic, Sarah found an old photograph album that she hadn't seen in years. It was filled with pictures of Emily, from her birth to her last birthday. As Sarah flipped through the pages, tears welled up in her eyes. She missed Emily more than anything in the world. When she reached the last page, her heart nearly stopped. There, in the corner of the last photograph, was a figure she hadn't noticed before. A little girl, standing in the shadows, her face partially obscured by the darkness. Sarah squinted at the photo, her hands trembling. The little girl looked eerily similar to Lily. A cold dread washed over Sarah as she closed the album and hurried downstairs. She needed answers. She called Mrs. Clarkson at the adoption center, but the number was disconnected. She drove to the center, only to find it abandoned, the windows boarded up, and a "for sale" sign out front. Panic set in as Sarah frantically searched for any information about Lily's past. She contacted the police, but they had no record of a girl named Lily being at the adoption center. Desperate, Sarah turned to old newspaper archives at the local library. After hours of searching, She finally found an article that made her blood run cold. 20 years ago, a little girl named Lily had been adopted from the same center. Within weeks of the adoption, the family began experiencing strange occurrences, much like what Sarah was going through. The article ended in tragedy. The entire family was found dead in their home, their bodies twisted in unnatural positions, as if they had died in agony. The only survivor was Lily, who was found sitting calmly among the corpses, humming a strange tune. She was taken to a mental institution, where she later died under mysterious circumstances. Sarah's hands shook as she read the final lines of the article. She rushed home, her mind a whirlwind of terror. When she arrived, the house was eerily silent. She called out for Lily, but there was no response. Slowly, Sarah made her way upstairs to Lily's room. The door was wide open, and the room was empty, except for a single photograph lying on the bed. It was a picture of Sarah, taken from behind, with Lily standing in the background, her eyes locked on the camera. Beneath the photo, in a child's scrawl, were the words, "I found you, Mommy." Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her. The lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she felt a cold hand on her shoulder. "Mommy," a voice whispered in her ear, "I'm home."